Chairman, if I may, let us pray.
Very well.
Dear Lord, thank you for bringing us all here in this virtual space as we seek to pursue what is best for the people that we serve. Hasten those who are on their way virtually and otherwise, and let us meet our objectives that we set for ourselves. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dr. Longmore. Do we have any apologies for absence apart from Member Tufton or Chairman? Senator Member Cavan Gale communicated that he will be late in joining.
Oh, I'm here, Chair.
Oh, you are now here.
Actually on time.
Very well.
Thanks.
Dr. Morris Guy, Member Corinthia Morrison, and Mrs. Petrona Seeley Brown apologize for being absent at the meeting.
All right, if we have no other indication, may we move to the reading and confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on November 11, 2021. Ms. Brandon, may I ask that you put page by page on the screen, please? Quick check of attendees to ensure that all are accurately reflected. Just a minute. If there is no correction to page 1, may we move for the adoption of page 1. Going once, twice, thrice. Page 2, please. All right, just pause before you go on to page 3. Any correction in relation to page 2? If there is none, move for page 2 to be adopted. Page 3.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon, Minister.
Hi.
Page 3. If there is no correction to page 3, may we move that it be adopted. Chairman, happy to have you join. We are at the agenda item dealing with the adoption of the minutes with an approach of going page by page, posted on screen and adopting if there is no correction.
Right. Okay.
I'm happy to hand over to you.
Right. Thank you very much, Madam AG and member from West Central St. James. Good afternoon to everyone. Again, unfortunately, something came up of an important nature, and I have, Madam AG has kindly consented to taking over the greater part of this meeting. And I am craving your indulgence and asking for your pardon that I will have to take off. I'm actually in Montego Bay, had to fly down for something. So just want to officially, for the minutes and otherwise, hand over to her. But before that, just to say that today, this meeting represents the final meetings for submissions. And the intention is to break for the rest of this year. And then early in the new year, once we get started, sometime in January, we will reconvene and begin the process of, as a committee, of course, looking at the bill, clause by clause, looking at the contributions that have been made, assessing the points of, agreement or not agreement, the points of where we have differences, and then hopefully coming down on a final document, which then will be tabled. So I just want to use the opportunity to thank all who have participated over the last number of months, including those who have contributed. I think the committee has been taken very seriously by members, and also the contributions were very solid, I think. And, you know, as chair, I really want to express my appreciation for the record to date, going into the end of the year and going into the end of this phase of the committee deliberation. To those who have participated, also to the parliamentary staff who have given very critical support, to my support team, Mr. Edwards, my legal team, Dr. Unique Campbell and others. And, you know, just to say, if I don't interact with you before the end of the year, you know, I hope that all will have a good season and it will be COVID-free, and we'll have some freedom to relax and enjoy and reflect in keeping with the theme of the season. I will use the time to go over a number of the submissions, including particularly those that I will miss, this one today, and I think I had missed one other meeting. I'm going to encourage other members to do the same, and the parliamentary support team to give where necessary any of the submissions that are requested, so that we can, in our minds, begin to prepare ourselves for the controversial or the clauses that require some sort of discussion over the next month, or maybe a little beyond that. Today is the 1st of December. So that's my intervention. I don't know if there's any other, you know, any issue that you may want to raise while I'm on. But I wanted to just put that in context before I hand over to Madam AG.
Madam AG and Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, Minister, I think it would also be very useful to recall that today, the 1st of December, is actually exactly 1 year since the tabling of the bill. So it's a 1-year anniversary of the tabling of the bill.
Okay, that's worth noting. Taking us a year to really deliberate, which is good in that it can be said to be a consultative process.
Very thorough, Minister.
Right. Okay, any other comments? I see a hand up. Is that yours, Mr. Edwards?
I am taking it down now, Minister.
Okay. All right. So can I hand over then to Madam AG?
Farewell, Minister. We are guided by your comments and instructions.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Ms. Brandon, shall we resume?
Over to you now, Madam.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you.
Brandon.
Brandon, can we continue? So we're now.
Madam A.
4. Yes.
Madam Chair, I just wanted, this may be a technical point, but in relation to page 2, the item 5, paragraph 5, welcome and opening remarks. It refers to the 2 entities that made oral submission. But in the scheme of things, at that time, they would not have made oral submission. So maybe we could say for accuracy, the 2 entities scheduled or expected to make oral submission. Because I did a double take when I read it.
Yes, Mr. Edwards. The 2 entities that were scheduled to make oral submissions at the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Put in page 4, any correction? If none, we move to page 5. Any correction to page 5? If none, we can move to page 6. Any correction to page 6? No correction. We move to page 7. I think any corrections here? If none, we can move on. Any correction to page 8? We move to page 9. Any correction to page 9? We move to page 10. Any correction to page 10? All right, we ask the correction to page 2 at the 5th item be taken, and I now move for confirmation of the minutes.
I so move, Chair.
Very well. Someone to second?
Seconded, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Allen.
Yeah, I believe that was Senator Golden Campbell. We do sound alike. We have that a lot, don't we?
I thought it was you. Very well. Seconded by Senator Golden Campbell. Ms. Brandon, we can move to the any matter arising from the minute as confirmed. Ms. Brandon, may you just post back the agenda on screen, please? Thank you. If there is no matter arising, then we can move to item 7, matter for discussion. May I have a confirmation of the presence of the Jamaica Coalition for Tobacco Control, Healthy Caribbean Coalition, the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, Boot to Go, and the Jamaica Psychological Society.
The Jamaican Psycho.
Present.
Yes.
Psychological Society. Thank you.
We are present.
The Chamber of Commerce is present.
And
And the JCTC is present.
Very well. And we have Boot to Go present also?
Yeah, present.
All right. I welcome each presenter to this sitting of the Joint Select Committee of the Houses of Parliament convened to consider and report on this tobacco bill, tobacco control bill. We're going to move straight into the presentation from the Jamaica Coalition for Tobacco Control, the Caribbean Coalition. I see Dr. Agri Arons. Welcome, Dr. Arons.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Over to you.
Thank you very much. I must thank the Joint Select Committee of Parliament for this opportunity to present the views of the JCTC. Now, we're going to be using some abbreviations in our presentation. And so it's very appropriate that we say what the JCTC is. It is the Jamaica Coalition for Tobacco Control, and its vision is for a tobacco-free Jamaica, and its mission is denormalizing the use of tobacco and all nicotine products. In the Jamaica Coalition, there are a number of organizations who are involved in healthcare in Jamaica. This is a group of similarly minded organizations with a mandate from all its members that meets on a regular basis at least every 3 months to discuss matters pertaining to tobacco control. It includes the Association of General Practitioners of Jamaica, the Caribbean Cardiac Society, the Caribbean College of Family Physicians, the Jamaica chapter, the Jamaica Psychiatric Association, the Diabetes Association of Jamaica, the Jamaica Cancer Society, the Nurses Association of Jamaica, the Heart Foundation of Jamaica, the Medical Association of Jamaica, and the Dental Association of Jamaica. All of these associations caring about tobacco control and the effects that it would have on the various segments of our Jamaican society. Now we're going to begin with talking about the prevalence. And we're just not going to spend too much time, but these will be gentle reminders about things that perhaps the Select Committee has been reminded of in the past. And I think we should keep in the forefront of our mind that the Jamaica Health and Lifestyle Survey shows that the current adult prevalence of smoking is 15%. Of course, because it is twice as prevalent in males as females, the males, 26%, bump up the figures, while the females, 5%, thank God for them, bring the figures to the more respectable 15%, which is too high for a third world country that is struggling against problems with non-communicable diseases. 90% of smokers start smoking before the age of 18 years, many much younger. And tobacco smoking, as we know, the key point is that it is addictive, and with all that addiction means. We've had presentations from the National Council against drug addiction, and they have been very clear, and we'll just remind you that once there is addiction, there is no longer the business of choice, which is usually insisted on by the tobacco industry, unfortunately, that people choose to smoke. I think that once addiction takes place, and the tobacco industry knows this, that once tobacco is addicted to, there is no turning back, and the process is very involved in getting smokers to relinquish this so-called choice. The World Health Organization, and a wonderful name it is from that organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus. He famously and recently proclaimed at the opening of one of the WHO conferences in November that if tobacco was a virus, it would long ago have been called a pandemic, and the world would have marshaled every resource to stop it. Thank you, Dr. Tedros, for that statement. The health impact of tobacco use in Jamaica. Interestingly, 78%, and that's a very high number, but it represents the kind of third world view, 78% of all deaths are caused by NCDs. The 2012 WHO Global Report on mortality attributable to tobacco states that the proportion of deaths attributable to tobacco was almost 12% for men and 6% for women. It's interesting that we also note, but important that we do, the impact of COVID-19 on smokers. Tobacco use in all forms, whether smoking or chewing, is significantly associated with severe COVID-19 outcomes. Pre-existing morbidities in tobacco users further aggravate the disease and makes the treatment of such disorders very, very difficult. It's interesting that we compare ourselves, and at this point we congratulate our friends in Barbados on their new Republican, shall I say, quest, and look forward to the example that they'll set. But they've also set an example in terms of tobacco control, because they are on the list of Caribbean states with tobacco control laws and regulations. And I don't think, just as in track and field, we don't want to be left behind. So February 2010, Trinidad and Tobago, October 2010, Barbados, February 2013, Suriname, July 2013, Jamaica, August 2017, Guyana joined the fray, and in September 2018, Antigua and Barbuda, and of course, St. Lucia in 2020. The Tobacco Control Act 2020, and of course, it is such a happy coincidence that it is called 2020, because as we all know, 2020 speaks to a degree of visual acuity for which we all strive. But the 2020 Tobacco Control Act, when enacted, will be one of the most comprehensive in the region. We look at the JCTC fully recommending this Tobacco Control Act, which is in keeping with Jamaica's obligations under the WHO FCTC. In particular, some key provisions outlined below, which have been proven to be more effective in reducing demand and consumption of tobacco and novel products. Very important that we include the novel products, and that set of novel products includes e-cigarettes. We note that these key provisions are usually challenged by the industry with suggestions related to loss of income, especially in the poorer areas, adverse economic and trade implications, and challenges to proven scientific evidence regarding health implications. We move on to the Tobacco Control Act 2020 and some key provisions of the Act. All of this information has been sent on, but the JCTC fully supports all provisions as outlined in our written submissions. However, for purposes of this presentation, we will focus on a few key ones. Of course, you have all of this presentation to remind you. As the minister said, it will be reviewed as we go along. Under the JCTC fully endorses these provisions, and under Article 5.3, parties agree in setting and implementing their public health policies with respect to tobacco control. They shall act to protect these policies from commercial and other vested interests and the tobacco, of the tobacco industry. The JCTC fully endorses these provisions. Moving right along, guidelines for the implementation of Articles 5.3 of the WHO/FCTC. One of the most important guiding principles is that there is a fundamental, note, fundamental, irreconcilable, and inherent conflict of interest between public health and the commercial and vested interest of the tobacco industry. The two things just are juxtaposed quite clearly. Because their products are lethal, the tobacco industry should not be granted incentives to establish or run their business. Incentives definitely are out. When we look at guidelines for implementation of Article 5.3 of the WHO FCTC, the key recommendations are that parties should interact with the tobacco industry only when and to the extent strictly necessary to enable them to effectively regulate the tobacco industry and tobacco products. Where interactions with the tobacco industry are necessary, parties should ensure that such interactions are conducted transparently, very important. I'm not going to say all of them because it's clear for you to read, but most importantly, parties should require government officials. Let me say that again. Parties should require government officials, and that is very broadly interpreted, to declare and divest themselves of direct interests in the tobacco industry. Because I think we've been hearing too much talk of things that are not transparent lately.
This matter?
When you say this matter, Madam Chair, you mean in terms of the divestment of interests?
Yes. So, and
well,
at what level are you speaking of? So you have the executive level, you have the parliamentarians, you have persons who work in the civil service, you have persons who work in the wider public service.
Okay, well, it is not for us to define the level to which it should go, but it should go as deeply and as widely as possible. And in fact, it would definitely not be in order for a permanent secretary or anybody of that level to have a vested interest, because they might as well be seen as lobbying for that particular industry. And I would imagine that the same things that apply to the Jamaica Stock Exchange, for example, where people are limited in terms of what they can invest in based on their prior knowledge of the status. In other words, the whole thrust to have transparency in government and in the financial sector is what I think, or what we think, should guide the application of this kind of involvement, and that this involvement should be made very clear and should preclude certain people from dealing with the tobacco industry, especially if they're implicated in terms of investment, you know? I trust that answers your question.
I understood it not to be merely a matter of transparency, but the conflict that may arise in enforcing any prohibition or control policy against persons with whom a decision maker or a decision influencer may be affiliated.
Okay. All right. Well, the Articles 5.3 is kind of instructive in terms of the guidelines. And I suppose that there will be more deliberation as the select committee takes its leave to discuss that. And I suppose too, that business interests, as far as North America especially, would want to have some influence on how that is adjudicated. But ours is not the business of telling, but just suggesting that it certainly would not be in order for the tobacco industry to be owned and operated by persons who have an interest in regulating it at the level of government. Yes?
Very well. Thank you for your response. You may proceed.
Is there anything else that needs clarification since we're asking at this point? Does any other member have any input that they wish to ask about? Not taking away the chairman's role, but, you know, since you're on this point.
Yes. Chair, may I since the
Yes.
door may have been opened. And I want to go back, Dr. Irons, to your key recommendations. And the
Yes.
bullet point that speaks to denormalize and to the extent regulate activities described as social responsible by the tobacco industry, including but not limited to activities described as corporate social responsibility. Why I ask the question is that you have entities that are multinationals that are prevalent in this industry. And part of the scope and function of a multinational is to promote their own corporate social responsibility in any society. But explain to us what is meant here and what is the limitation of purpose that you would be encouraging in this particular area to denormalize.
Okay, I think that there will be other elements of our presentation that directly address the business of corporate social responsibility. But as a nation, we have become accustomed to entities sponsoring particular events. And one of the painful things that seem to have been done pretty painlessly was the fact that Carreras used to support, promote, call it what you will, the Sportsman of the Year award. And one can see that using psychological principles with which I'm a little acquainted, that when you associate a lethal or dangerous product with a wholesome or uplifting activity, you tend either to reduce the activity or, even more importantly, to dilute the lethal effect of the product that you make the association. So that the whole change from having a new sponsor for the Sportsman of the Year award, for example, was an attempt, a very transparent attempt, to kind of not give the tobacco industry the kind of purification which it seeks to justify the fact that, you know, we do this and we do that, therefore our product is not so bad. And this is not only unfair, it is really misleading. And this is what we're trying to do. Of course, when you give a scholarship, particularly say a medical scholarship, and you make it clear that this is being awarded for or by the particular industry. And today we're discussing the tobacco industry. And what you really are saying is that in spite of all of this, we are going to make a contribution to admitting to what we are doing, that it is, you know, directly causing harm, but we are diluting the harm by corporate social responsibility. And then you will notice that the response is that more people are drawn to this. For example, if you drive through Constant Spring each morning, you will see those famous sellers of cigarettes in the Manor Park roundabout area under the umbrella, literally, of a particular cigarette company. And the sign is there, despite the fact that advertisement is not to be present. The sign is there in big bold letters. Are you bold enough? And this is highly suggestive to young minds and to people who are suggestible, you know? And this is what we would like to reduce. We don't want people to believe or go away with the opinion that it's okay because they do this, then, you know, we are in support of that. Is that clear, sir?
Thank you for that, Dr. Thank you very much. Thank you,
Okay.
Chair.
All right, Dr. Irons, just a little signaling that we do have 3 other presenters.
Absolutely, and we are very aware that we need to move
with the
quickly.
time, right?
Yes, and we are about halfway through our presentation.
Well, I'd ask if you can wrap it up in about 5 minutes, but there is one issue that I note from.
But Madam AG, that's like asking people to give evidence quickly.
AG, I might perhaps it would be better if we could allow him to finish and then we just ask questions at the end.
Suggestion taken, Senator Golding Campbell. Just flagging an issue that is covered in your presentation about the e-cigarette and
yes,
comparison that was made with the combustible nicotine and the non-combustible nicotine, because a presentation was made previously to the committee in relation to this matter. Just bringing it to your attention. So when you get
yes, when we get there, we will speed up, because we are conscious of the fact that you know, even though we're having a good time, we have to make sure that other people have time and space. So give me the go ahead, Madam Chair, and I will proceed.
Please proceed.
Okay, well, we're coming up to e-cigarettes now then. Let's talk about e-cigarettes now that you've flagged it. The whole business of vaping, and this is taken from the e-cigarette policy brief from the World Health Federation in October of this year, 2021. And the fact is that a growing body of literature suggests that e-cigarettes are associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular and other mortality and morbidity. A number of studies, and we won't go into naming all of them, but they have confirmed that e-cigarettes are far from harmless. And the e-lifestyle and the e-liquids and the e-cigarette aerosols contain harmful substances that basically make our blood sticky. And these are commonly found in conventional cigarette emissions as well. So this is not a part of the presentation, but what you don't want to do is swap black dog for monkey. Electronic cigarettes look like this. We won't waste any time showing you the components or anything like that. You can look this over very carefully so that you will know these things when your children bring them home. Now, there's a little controversial thing about the FDA approving e-cigarettes as a useful tool for tobacco cessation and saying that it perhaps may not be as harmful as other cigarettes. But this was met with a lot of disapproval from the American Lung Association. And it is very surprising that the FDA should, given their history of testing things to find out, what they really do is compare whether things are harmful as against useful. And usually the score of harmfulness, once it's extreme, it exceeds the score of usefulness, is taken into account in their judgment. But it seems like, well, certainly in the eyes of the American Lung Association, they misjudged e-cigarettes in terms of their approval. Next slide, although very colorful, we won't spend much time on, but it just shows you the various attractive devices. And we say attractive, especially to young people, that are being used to deliver this new fantastic material into the lungs of young people and being used in the successful seduction of our youth in terms of the risks associated with youth and cigarette and e-cigarette use. It's all about, I mean, there is no doubt that it is focused on the young, and it's very interesting. I hope the point was made before, but it can't be made too often, that one of the most prolific sales areas for e-cigarettes and so on is right outside the gate of one of our most fashionable urban high schools, and it seems to be doing very well. Tobacco companies are seducing the youth, not only in Jamaica, but in Africa. In fact, because the market seems to be diminishing, everything is being done by our friends in the tobacco industry. And in South Africa and in Ghana, the cancer watch people are on the lookout for the new effects of youth involvement and e-cigarettes, and looking for the tobacco companies who, when we look at the Global Youth Tobacco Survey, the data in the Caribbean, which is in front of you now, you see the various ages, which you can see for yourself. And you will see further when we look at global youth tobacco surveys in the Caribbean, you see how Trinidad, for example, has upped its use of e-cigarettes and is not at the low level that they had achieved with normal cigarette smoking. Moving right along, as the people say, looking at the global youth survey for the NCDA in Jamaica in 2017, the percentages are very clear. 11.3% of students currently smoking cigarettes, 11.7% of students currently using electronic cigarettes. And what we really don't want is for our young people to be seduced into these new habits, which could be just as harmful. And of course, we have outlined how interesting the marketing and appeal for e-cigarettes has been, especially to the young people, and it's they who we wish to protect. One of the fascinating things, and I was very fascinated when I found this out, there are up to 15,000 flavors available to draw the children towards the business of nicotine use. And once you hook them with the nicotine, it takes away their choice. Won't go over this anymore because, as you reminded me, Madam Chair, these things have been dealt with by previous presenters. It's just that e-cigarettes are part of a nicotine delivery system as well. And it's interesting as we come out of the business of e-cigarettes, and it's very interesting that this is not a posed picture. This is something that happens in the dance hall all over the place, and the volume of smoke that is emitted from using e-cigarettes is part of the catch too. It kind of looks fashionable and very modern and hip. We don't want to encourage that. Although not harmless, current evidence suggests that completely switching from tobacco cigarettes to electronic cigarettes would reduce exposure. And that is what the tobacco industry would like us to believe. Nonetheless, surveys indicate that a majority of e-cigarette users, and this is a catch, are dual users of both conventional and electronic cigarettes, which carries an increased health risk. Okay, I think you've heard enough about e-cigarettes, but if we take a good look backwards, we will remember that once we use nicotine as a hook, it takes away the choice, and the persons, especially the ladies, if you remember the whole business of we've come a long way, baby, that gets them going. And the addictive nature of cigarettes, I was particularly enamored with this particular slide with the hook and the cigarettes being the bait. And the fact that, as we say here, the nicotine is our wicked inducer of the whole process of addiction. Evidence is very clear that over the past 50 years, tobacco manufacturers have become more efficient in the design and the delivery of their deadly product. As far as Article 13, do we have that one there? Good. As far as Article 13 of the FCTC ban on tobacco advertising and promotion is concerned, and sponsorship, again, more letters, TAPS, we think that all advertising and promotion of tobacco products or relevant products or tobacco sponsorship should be prohibited, so as not to artificially seeming to cleanse the product, but really to control its use among those who slip and fall. On the next slide, we will look at Caribbean states. Again, we don't want to be left behind. I mean, you know, we're not a republic yet, but I guess one of these days we might think about it. Caribbean states with tobacco control laws that include tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship. You are asking about that. Trinidad and Tobago in 2010, Suriname 2013, Guyana in 2017, and I think, you know, it would be nice for us to be included in 2021. 1 minute or two to go. I get it. The Tobacco Control Act 2020, we have looked at that, and we want to take a quick look at the smoking rate by socioeconomic status, just to remind you that in the lower socioeconomic groups, tobacco use is at its highest, and it's at its lowest in the higher socioeconomic groups. That speaks for itself in terms of who the industry is targeting and who they succeed with. Also, in terms of levels of education, unfortunately, it is the persons in the lower levels that are being targeted and targeted successfully, while some other people are smart enough, based on their educational level, to stay away. The figures are highlighted in red and speak for themselves. Not to alarm anyone, but if you go by the current prices and you deal with the taxes that are charged, if you happen to be one of the unfortunate persons who smokes a 20-pack per day, you incur a bill of $444,935 for your habit, and a gentle reminder that the national minimum wage is $364,000 per year. I think you can do the math and see what's going on. As far as corporate social responsibility is concerned, and this is what you were promised, we did dilate on the subject, but just to show you a few slides that show you how the cigarette companies have been getting around the business of not advertising and promoting and so on. They benefit from ads in the papers that speak about how they benefit situations, and those ads include things like police bikes and scholarships, etc. And one highlighted group, well, we'll soon come to that, but if we look at the scales, you will see that on the one hand, the amounts that are earned from taxes and from scholarships, which speak for themselves, have no comparison to the $48.5 billion that is used to care for persons who are suffering from the health deficits. As far as corporate social responsibility, just want to show you that even though they say that there is no fanfare or anything like that, the following slide shows you on World Tobacco Day, just inadvertently, I suppose, by accident, on World Tobacco Day, how accurate the tobacco company was in giving away scholarships on May 31st. By the way, try and remember, May 31st every year, No Tobacco Day. As we go on to the end of our presentation, we'd just like to remind the tobacco companies and the Ministry of Finance that the illicit trade in tobacco products and its relation to tobacco taxes. There is a dehiscence or a difference in terms of what the tobacco companies say is the amount, and our finance figures show that it is usually about half the estimated amount of illegal products that are present, and that this presence of illegal tobacco is more a reflection of border control than anything else. We've reached a summary, Madam Chairman, and I would just like to say very quickly, remind you that there's a fundamental, irreconcilable, and inherent conflict of interest between public health and the commercial and vested interest of the tobacco industry. That parties should require government officials, as we got stuck on in the first question, to declare and divest themselves of direct interest in the tobacco industry. The advent of e-cigarettes is to increase the market share and addict a new generation through varied flavors, etc. There's CSR by the tobacco industry, that is corporate social responsibility, is just another way of marketing their product, similar to e-cigarettes, to make their market bigger and replace lost smokers. Interestingly, in the United States of America, a finding just published at the end of October this year, cigarette sales have gone up this year for the first time in 20 years. And this, I think, has a lot to do with boredom and staying at home and so on. And no amount of corporate social responsibility by the tobacco industry for scholarships can ever compensate for the dead and the dying. We want to just say that we are in full support of larger labels, and that will also help the tobacco industry to identify the illicit ones. Just want to mention, before we go, two of our champions, Dr. Knox Hagley, and of course, the one and only John Maxwell, who died from smoking disorders. Well, Knox didn't die of a smoking disorder, but he was a chairman before I was. And so I feel kind of tottering while I'm standing on his shoulders, trying to get the work complete. That, you know, we try not to save patients one at a time these days, but the pandemic has shown us that public health is very important in saving patients millions at a time rather than just one at a time. I want to thank you for your interest, and I want to thank you for making me more of a sprinter than a long distance runner, Madam Chair. And I invite all the members to take one collective deep breath in and take time and exhale for twice as long as we inhale, and you will get twice as much of the joy that cigarettes promise simply by breathing the wonderful fresh air that we've been blessed with. So thank you very much, and thanks very much to the group.
I'll reserve my comments until after questions, clarifying questions are posed. A very provocative presentation. Thank you, Dr. Ahrens.
Happy to know that I provoked you, Madam Chair.
I open the floor for questions.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Senator Golding Campbell.
Just a couple of questions, Dr. Ahrens. Good to see you.
Pleasure is mine, ma'am.
You mentioned early in your presentation in dealing with Article 5.3, you were talking about the question of incentives to the tobacco industry. I'm not aware that the tobacco industry benefits from incentives, but my question to you is.
Well, there was a time when land was offered to tobacco farmers in Clarendon at a very reasonable rate. And of course, the incentives of which we speak have to do with allowing them to promote while not advertising, which is another way of advertising. But I have two members of my very able team with me who are just as able or even better so to answer questions. So any questions that I cannot handle quickly, I am going to invite them to answer in my stead. Yes, go ahead, please, Senator.
Okay. So the tobacco industry, however, is now faced with a scenario where our international obligations and this act to fulfill those obligations essentially are removing from the tobacco industry the resources, the tools that other industries have to conduct business and to promote profitability of those businesses. And so I'm asking this just to get an understanding of how we are positioning and how you are positioning, how your group is positioning. I get the negative effects of tobacco. I get it is not something that we want to promote in relation to our health. But is there an argument for the restrictions that we're placing on the tobacco industry being unfair as compared with, the treatment of the alcohol industry, for argument's sake?
Well, the alcohol industry is always compared. And of course, some people throw in a little marijuana on the side. The fact is that alcohol is not as lethal in terms of non-communicable diseases and the treatment as, say, tobacco. And in fact, we know that prohibition of alcohol
has having a problem with the connection.
I'm hearing
yes,
you.
You're hearing me clearly, I'm sure.
I'm hearing you.
I was having some difficulties, so I guess it's on my end. Sorry about that.
Okay, happens in the world of electronics. But we don't think that it is fair to the unborn child or to the families of those who have to witness. I mean, it's a very painful thing to witness people drawing their last breath from lung cancer, while at the same time begging for a cigarette, you know? And what I'm going to do, you may have heard from her before, but I'm going to ask Mrs. Chen to address that area because she is very, very keen on it.
Dr. Ans, before you do that, let me just throw out, in the interest of time,
yes,
my two other questions. The second, and you can just opine on them at the same time. The second was the question of government officials and who you define those officials to be. And the Attorney General had begun that question and discussion earlier. But I would wish for the JCTC, since the position has been taken, to say whether or not the officials are at the decision-making point or level, or are collectively government, anybody who works in government agencies, because we do have a provision in the bill that subjects persons who are working in the public service in a very general way and doesn't have the limitation of any particular decision-making level. That's my second question. And my third question would be to ask you if you could just remind us, and I'm not recalling the previous presentations at the moment, if you are aware, what is the WHO's position on e-cigarettes? Those are my three questions. I'm yielding. Thank you.
Okay. We did touch on the position, but this is, beg your pardon?
I know the presentation is thought-provocative and it is helping us to weigh through some of the issues, but we have to monitor the time to enable the other presenters to
I understand, ma'am.
Also.
Good.
We will invite you to stay on afterwards.
Okay, fine. But I still would like the opportunity of having Mrs. Chen address the questions because they're very important questions. And then I'd like to just make one personal comment and then I'll go my way.
We will be happy to have you on stage, Ms. Chen. Yes.
Just to say that there is no safe level of tobacco use, so we can't compare tobacco to other products, and that the guidelines on the implementation of 5.3 are very instructive in relation to government officials and having investment and shares into tobacco industry. And the tobacco control bill before us is reflective of these guidelines. And there was consensus when this was adopted by the parties. So that is already very clear.
And we don't want to seem to be directing government or anybody to define the persons who should be limited. I think that is entirely up to government to decide on the various levels. But I'll tell you a personal story before I go. I have a niece who has recently qualified in the medical area, and her school fees were going to be subject to a scholarship. And when I learned that the scholarship was one of the Carrera scholarships, I had to declare to her and her family that, you know, as chairman of the JCTC, it would look kind of bad if my niece were to be benefiting from a cigarette company scholarship. And consequently, therefore, my dear wife had to pay all the fees for her loving niece, which cost the family a few $1 million, but it was well spent in the interest of transparency, you know? It is that sort of thing that we want to enable and we want to prevent going forward.
On that note, let me thank you for the presentation. Thank you.
AG, I don't think science had responded to the WHO issue on e-cigarettes.
The WHO guidelines on e-cigarettes is the same as what we've presented earlier. It was like in our third or fourth slide. It's right there. I had put it in my to-go file, but
find out. I can go back and look at it. I didn't realize it was.
Yeah, man, it's there. Okay.
Right. That satisfies you.
Thank you, AG. Yes, thank you.
Well. Very well.
And,
thank you so much.
I wish to comply with the AG's wishes, you see.
Please.
I don't want to take away our human rights.
You are being very provocative, Dr. Adams. But thank you so much for the well thought out presentation and for your members. You are invited to stay on and listen. Brandon?
Chairman, Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I must indicate my gratitude to my colleague and one of my mentors, Dr. Agri Irons, for his presentation. Dr. Irons, I especially appreciate, and your team, Ms. Deborah Chen and the others of the JCTC. I especially appreciate you highlighting the fact of the addictive nature and reminding us of the removal of choice, the clarity on e-cigarette use, and especially the Caribbean precedent set on the advertising and promotional use of tobacco in our society. Thank you again, Dr. Irons. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Senator.
Just to say, without belaboring the point, that your presentation has really put some rebuttal information for the committee to deliberate on, particularly in relation to e-cigarettes, and also the clarity with which you state the inherent irreconcilable conflict between the tobacco industry and the regulators of tobacco. More anon. Ms. Brandon, we move to the next presenter. We invite the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Larry Watson, and I'm the CEO of the Chamber of Commerce. Is my presentation going to go up, or you just want me to speak? I don't know. I pass it on to your team.
Yes, the presentation has been given. The presentation was presented to us previously. I would ask you to give us a summary with your main issues.
Okay. And I do believe, following on the previous speaker, I would have, 55 minutes? I'm kidding, Madam AG. Mine will be much briefer. Thank you very much for the opportunity for the Chamber to present some comments on the Tobacco Act 2020. Next slide. Okay, thank you. One of the points we would like to bring out to the committee is that the bill appears to be written to deal with companies and persons that sells only tobacco products. And just to bring to your attention that there are some companies that handle multiple product lines, which include tobacco products. Now, we are of the opinion that the bill as written will create some significant challenges for these companies with multiple product lines. And to put it another way, one may find that you have a distribution company and only 5 or 10% of their sales may be in tobacco products. And therefore, some of the composition of the bill that is targeted specifically to the company and or the persons would create challenges that if somebody at 1 minute is selling tobacco and then in the other part of their price list, they may be selling food or pharmaceuticals or personal care items, the restrictions on the tobacco products would then translate into others. So we just provide this as a guiding light for your consideration and reflection as you look to fine-tune the bill. Next slide. Right, now clause number 24 and clause 1 E, J, K, and N of the 4th schedule really seeks to disrupt the relationship of key business partners by prohibiting gift giving, the offering of discounted products, retailers incentives, and the offering of financial support to venue operators. Now, whereas we understand the principle that this clause is going for, we just want to remind the committee that the distributor, wholesale, and retail model is one where discounts are a part of doing business. 2 examples that I'd like to bring to your attention is quantity purchases has a cost saving in order processing and delivery. And these savings are sometimes passed on to customers. An example of that would be if 1 case of a product is being delivered on a truck and on another truck, 100 cases, that you'll have significant saving in the delivery charges on the truck that's delivering 100 cases, and some of these savings may be passed on to the customer. Another one is sometimes the customers pay for cash instead of taking credit, they get discounts. So we just put this on the table for the committee to explore, and in your deliberations to understand that not all discounts or incentives or that are given to customers in the distributor, wholesale, and retail network is necessary to incentivize sale, which I do believe is what the schedule is trying to deal with. Next slide. Now, clause 4 outlines and reserve the power, and power reserved by the minister. Specifically, the regulation of design features, the labeling, packaging, sale, distribution, and advertising, control testing methods, standards, prohibition of constituents and ingredients. The Chamber is of the considered view that the power of the minister outlined in the Act is outside of the minister's remit. Some regulatory measures should not be performed by ministerial fiat, but ought to be mandated by the Parliament as the Constitution dictates. that the passing of law is a prerogative of Parliament and not a minister. And I just want to put this into perspective by saying, just to consider the possibility that one day Jamaica may have a minister of health that is pro-tobacco, and the consequence of that could be quite far-reaching. So
just a quick response to this point. So it is permissible for the Parliament to delegate its lawmaking power to someone else within a defined sphere. The extent of the power to be exercised or that is delegated is usually specified by the provision in the Act, which sets out what can and cannot be done while giving a little bit of latitude. Your point is taken, but it is important to understand how the delegation of power to a minister or any other person, natural or legal, is done in law.
Thank you very much, Madam AG, and I take counsel, and that is why the first part of the presentation indicates what I do believe the Act highlighted. And again, we just caution that you know, it could have consequences if one, you know, for want of a better word, gets a maverick minister. But point taken, and we have made our point, and I will try not to go as long as Dr. Ian, so I will go to the next slide, Madam AG. Next slide, ma'am. Okay, thank you. Clause 17(2) of the bill prohibits a display of tobacco products which result in tobacco products being sold under the counter. Now, a ban on tobacco products will fuel the illicit trade. From a current and historical context, illicit goods have been sold under the counter and are currently sold under the counter. A good example is illegal rum, such as Kulo Kulo or JB, which Madam AG, you know, I know is quite prevalent in your constituency in the West.
You're not by any means suggesting that the Attorney General is personally familiar with the indictment.
Well, no, I would not make such comment, because in fact, these illegal rums, by the mere nature of being under the counter, has been given the name bend down, because they were hidden and sold from under the counter. And in the past, these illegal overproof rum has been estimated to be about 10 to 25% of the legal rum market, which has resulted in a significant loss of revenue for the government. So we are just suggesting to you that based on the current and historical perspective, that having the products not being available for display, either for government persons to survey and to see that the products are in fact legal, but also for the consumer to make a choice, can be a very, very dangerous area to venture into. And we
just to ask for a quick response, in the previous presentation, it was said that it is ill-conceived to make a comparison between tobacco and alcohol, for example, because the harm done by tobacco is nowhere near the harm done by alcohol. And often the comparison is made by the tobacco economic interest as a way to deflect attention from the extent of the harm of the tobacco product.
And I completely buy that, Madam Chair. But I mean, this particular point is not dealing with the comparison of tobacco to alcohol from a point of view of the health aspect. It is only dealing with the point of the availability for sale and the display of the product. That what the Act suggests is that tobacco products cannot be on display at all. And as a result, if this is in fact the case and somebody was selling illegal tobacco, an inspector that was going in would have no way of seeing that the product was in fact illegal. So it is really just for the availability and to draw reference to the fact that illegal JB or Kulo Kulo, as it is called, you know, came from the stolen rum from the estates. And because it was sold under the counter and therefore called bend down, deprived the government of a significant revenue base. And that really is the point there.
Thank you.
Okay. And number 17, going ahead very quickly. Clause 17, part 1 and 2 of the first schedule proposes an increase in the graphic health warning. Article 11 of the WHO Framework Convention of Tobacco Control specifies health warning and messages on tobacco product packaging and labeling should be 50% or more, but not less than 30% of the principal display area. As it stands, I believe that, the current regulation requires 60% of the GHW. We believe that the proposed increase from 60 to 80 is unnecessary, and I do believe that the 60% does the job adequately to communicate and also allows for the branding representation on there. And falls within the government, the WHO guideline, which I do know is a guiding light for the government as we move ahead. The next slide. Clause 9, 3B, B and C prohibits the investment in tobacco company and related industries. The prohibition of investment in the industry may in fact be unconstitutional. The Charter of Rights stipulates that for the same to be done, it must be demonstratively justified in a free and democratic society. And prohibiting civil servants from holding such security, we're not sure is demonstrably justified. This could mean that civil servants could be barred from investing in some of Jamaican leading companies, manufacturing and distribution companies, if these companies were selling tobacco products. And I bring this point to the committee because if you recall my first slide, when I indicated to you that the bill deals, it would appear specifically for companies that deal solely in tobacco products. And one may have a very large distribution company and or manufacturing company servicing for example, a hotel that deals with Far Asian clients, and they may want to bring in tobacco products for their guests. Now, the fact that they may be selling a couple of cases of a tobacco product specifically to these clients would in fact eliminate them or void them of being an investment opportunity. And quite frankly, it may in fact create quite an issue when one looks at the pension landscape of Jamaica. Whereas, because companies that may or may be involved in the tobacco business would not be available for investment. So again, we just bring some caution in that area. And I'm clearly being very clear because I'm getting not as many questions as Dr. Irons. Next slide, please. Clause, next slide, please, ma'am, or sir. Thank you. Clause 19.1 prohibits the sale of tobacco in public place. A public place is defined in the interpretation section of the bill as any structure, facility, or place of assembly, or other place available to be used collectively by the public, including a government office and a space or building of any type, regardless of ownership of or right of access to any such place, office, space, or building. We believe that the inclusion of public place will prohibit the sale of tobacco and related products from being sold in all stores, shops, supermarkets, bars, among other places. The bill in itself, we think, established very strict guidelines of which entities that are technically prohibited from selling tobacco products and how others ought to operate. So we are not sure that this all-encompassing definition, Madam, is absolutely necessary, and it is in fact worthy of review. Next slide, which all it does is says a big thank you for taking the time. And I know you want to thank me, Madam AG, for not taking as much time as my good friend, Dr. Irons, who is clearly much more articulate than I am. But I leave myself open to any questions that one may have. Anybody here may have.
Let me thank you, Mr. Watson, again for a very thoughtful presentation. And you have raised issues which the committee will have to deliberate on a little more closely. And also thank you for the succinctness of the presentation. I will open quickly to question with the reminder that we do have 2 other presentations to follow.
The chamber was very clear, Madam AG.
Perhaps it's an indication of the clarity which you made the presentation. We invite you to stay on so that
Larry, you smoked through the presentation. That's why.
Senator Gale, good to see you, sir.
Good to see you, my friend.
Yes, very well. All right, please feel free to stay on, Mr. Watson.
It has been a pleasure.
Yes. We have Boots to Go and the Jamaica Psychological Society. Earlier, when I did the roll call, Boots to Go was not present. Not sure if they are now present.
Yes, I'm present.
They are present. Very well, Mr. Booth. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. My slide is up. Good afternoon to the rest of committee members. My name is Wayne Booth, Adjuster of Peace of St. Anne. I'm also a member of the Jamaica Gasoline Retailers Association. So I'm speaking with many hats this evening. Next slide, please. The next slide, the one after that. Yes. Who are we? Who am I? Boot to Go. I'm the CEO of Boot to Go with 3 locations, 2 in St. Anne, 1 in Kingston. Primarily my business is gas station, pharmacy, supermarket, convenience store, restaurant, paymaster, lottery. As you can see, a large component of my business is retail of food, alcohol, and tobacco products. Next slide, please. So this bill will certainly affect my business. This bill commemorative components that intend to safeguard health and safety. But it has a component that it will change the dynamics of my business and the ability to operate competitively, as I will no longer be able to sell tobacco products, including cigarettes, e-cigarettes in my establishment, benefit from discounts, promotion, sponsorship from my supplier, display of tobacco products, in addition to other restrictions, which I will highlight later. Next slide. The one before it. The one before this one, yeah. The other one, yeah. Well, all right, go back to that, yeah. Go back to that one. The one after this. Okay. No, the other one. Which, yeah. There are 5 areas of concern of my business which this bill will affect. Ban on tobacco sales in public places. This to me captures every place of business, including supermarket, as the previous presenter said, corner shop, the man with the umbrella open with a certain advertisement on it. This to me, all of this is public space or public place. And personally for me, this amount ban will entail of tobacco product will cause to lose an estimate of about 4% of my business. And you could say, multiply that by all the other convenience stores / gas stations. Next slide, please. Other concern too is the ban on display of tobacco products. The health risks associated with storing tobacco products on the counter or on the floor. This will compromise the safety of the product and the freshness of the product. The ban on discounts and sponsorship. I have a personal story on the sponsorship where for the first time I was invited to Las Vegas at a Knox show. This is a show for convenience stores where people worldwide gather, share best practices, best ideas. This was paid for by the cigarette company. I was not handed a pack of cigarettes to smoke. It was sponsored for me to get the best practice to come back and enhance my business. Next slide. Next slide. Ban on investment. As the previous presenter said, this one is difficult, and I'd love the committee to look at it. Because when you think of, say, the pension schemes, they will no longer be able to invest in pension schemes because they are part of the Tobacco Association. This one the committee will have to look into personally. Also, vaping. I know Dr. O'Brien said vaping was bad and everything was bad about it, but in my research, vaping can also help you to quit smoking. He did not highlight that part of it. It's less lethal, it's less harmful.
Mr. Booth, just to say that part of the presentation given to us does highlight that it is contradicting that very point. So we will have to contend with the competing views.
What section of it? Because I said it helps you to quit smoking.
Right. So it is actually said in part of what was presented to us that it results in addiction. It's not true. It's really a substitute. So the presentation says it has been marketed as a smoke quitting product, but what the data reveal, it is said through the material presented to the committee, is that it really amounts to a substitute. And in fact, it shows that it also results in addiction. Not to detain your presentation, I just thought I'd throw that in for you.
Thanks, Madam Chair, for your input. Next slide. Yeah, a big thank you also for the committee to consider me and listen the little man on the street and listen the retailer and consider some of these things in the final draft, because this is going to hit us at the core of our business. Thanks again, Madam Chair.
Let me thank you for accepting the invitation to make the presentation. It is extremely important that we get as wide a perspective as possible, particularly when the decisions being proposed will have a huge impact on persons like yourself. Your presentation.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Yes. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Any question from committee members? If none, also invite you to stay on, Mr. Booth, if you so choose.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
We will move to the Jamaica Psychological Society, JAMPSych.
Jamaica Psychological.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, Madam AG, for having invited the Jamaican Psychological Society to make a presentation on this. And it has been an evening well spent. Thought-provoking from Dr. Irons to Mr. Booth, very, very interesting. So we are grateful to be here. And we just want to make our presentation and we'll be very quick. The Jamaican Psychological Society is the professional body for psychologists and counselors in Jamaica. We exemplify the high professional standards. I'm sorry. wow, sorry. Yes, high professional standards whilst providing quality continuing education, ensuring public awareness and advancing psychology and counseling as a profession. Under the core values of integrity, accountability, transparency, professionalism, inclusiveness, cultural relevance, and social responsibility and respect for diversity. The policy committee comprises Dr. Kai Morgan, who was here earlier and apologizes that she had to go, and Ms. Jevila Ho, who is our vice president, and Dr. Kerry-Ann Peart, who is the director of the policy committee, Rochelle Davis, Valerie McKenzie, and I'm Margaret Barnett, the director of advocacy. And so we looked at the bill that was sent to us, and we started, and we would like to say that we believe the bill has given a good overview of the objective of the act in question and states a case for the relevance of the act as it pertains to the negative health outcomes and also the impact that it will have on public health and also us achieving our 2030 goals. The points to clarify state the bill doesn't make reference to which ministry is really responsible. And so we make the assumption that it is the Minister of Health and Wellness. And so we're asking for that to be explicitly stated, notwithstanding that this particular bill cuts across different ministries. And so maybe the Ministry of Health, and I believe the Ministry of Health would be the responsible ministry.
All right, just a little bit of information. So every year the government does an assignment of subject matters against portfolio ministry, and that is posted on the GIS website among other places.
Yes.
So if you're ever in any doubt, you can always Google assignment of subject matters, and then you will see the ministry, the minister's permanent secretary, the subject matter, the various acts and the departments that fall under the ministries as constituted.
Thank you for the clarification. Also, in terms of youth and the source of the definition, as mentioned on page 8, youth indicates ages 15 to 24. However, surveys done by the National Council on Drug Abuse have found that substance misuse starts as early as age 12 years old, in some cases even younger. Is the term being used? We're asking this question on statistical data utilized to formulate this act within the Jamaican context, or is there a general reference being given to the World Health Organization's definition of youth? Part 2 speaks to the administration, and we dealt with that before, so I'll just move on to part 3, the protection and control, tobacco control policies, inclusion of a psychosocial framework in national strategies of the public health policy, the framework to intentionally address precipitating antecedent psychosocial factors for tobacco use. The framework is essential to understanding motivations for tobacco use and an opportunity to establish informed approaches to reducing and preventing use. An explicit statement highlighting exacerbation of psychological and psychiatric symptoms among certain users and consumers of tobacco.
Dr. Barnett, just let me make a further clarity. It is usual and proper for laws when they refer to a minister to also indicate minister with responsibility for what. So my answer is not to say that the bill should not so indicate if it has not done so, but it was just additional information to you, so others listening on may not be misguided.
Great, thank you again for the clarity, Madam. Okay, so we went on to part 5 that speaks to tobacco smoke-free environment and the definition required for secondhand smoke. Needed a revision of the 5 meters radius as protection for second-hand smoke, consideration for communication strategy of non-smoking and smoking-free and smoke-free areas to include individuals of varying literacy and developmental levels and differing physical abilities. So the bill needs to give consideration in terms of its communication strategy to the literacy and the disabilities of our different stakeholders. Emphasize the enforcing of restrictions in environments where smoking is prohibited, example, school and university campuses. Guidance and support to business owners to enhance compliance to space restrictions, and a robust mechanism required to prevent business owners circumventing policy, ensure equitable fines applied for non-compliant businesses without adding burden to current judicial system. On part 6, tobacco products or relevant products. Consider the licensing of tobacconists, individuals or businesses that are legally permitted to sell and distribute tobacco products, monitored similarly to those with alcohol permits. License would support increased accountability and positively disrupt the act of selling tobacco products to minors or even under the counter. I'm not sure what they will call it. Collaboration of the Tobacco Control Act and the Child Care and Protection Act. And this would facilitate the protection of children regarding their purchasing of tobacco products on behalf of adults or even for themselves. Graphic health warning designed to include the varied motivations for using tobacco and tobacco-related products and applicable to consumers. A biopsychosocial approach to behavioral change to be adopted. Penalties for non-compliance should not rely only on fines. Penalties should include community service orders focused on the drug misuse to educate offenders to the long-term effects of their actions. Part 7, advertising, promotion, sponsorship. A ban is not, in our estimation, the ban is useful, but it is not enough. More attention is required to support behavior change strategies through consistent and wide-scale public education strategies. Take a closer look at the cultural factors that influence the effectiveness of a ban on tobacco in Jamaican context, and utilize the findings of this closer examination of cultural factors to develop informative public education and psychosocial strategies. And I'm continuing on the advertising. This morning, to cement this point, I asked my assistant to just go and buy me a pack of cigarettes and a tobacco. I got a stick of tobacco and I got a pack of cigarettes. And I had to, even though I'm wearing, I have 4 eyes, I could not see the Surgeon General's warning about the use of tobacco. And we want to make the point that even if, as we are talking about the medical reasons for not smoking, we need to talk about the mental health reasons for not smoking. And these should be clearly stated on the wrappings and the advertisements. And I'm not even seeing the I don't know if you can see it, I'm not even seeing the Surgeon General's warning on these tobacco. Don't know if they're legal or illegal, but I'm just making the point that the warnings on packagings are critical tools for tobacco cessation and prevention. And pictorial warnings are highly effective in communicating health risks of smoking to the public. And packet warnings, however, primarily have communicated the physical risk of smoking. JAMPSYCH is advocating that warnings should expand to include the mental health risks of tobacco use, such as secondhand smoke exposure is associated with increased risks of depressive symptoms. And we're saying that those should be clearly stated on the packages that are here.
Dr. Barnett, someone once said to me that those who are bent on using a product will bypass any warning about the dangers of the product. And I'm just saying to those who are listening, perhaps I have had to think long and hard about that which has been said. The education that is taking place through these presentations, highlighting the danger and the importance of the warning, perhaps is an indication to members of the public that where warnings are given on products, they really are to be taken seriously. I find your demonstration of the products quite useful of picking up the tobacco and the cigarette. I will have to look at it myself.
Yes. And Chair, maybe just to add to what you have said, maybe that's why the focus has moved now more to pictorial warnings, to make it more graphical, and even the promotion of enlarging it. Because what Dr. Barnett was indicated, nobody is looking at the what is written, but if it's more a picture in nature and it's more graphical in nature, it may drive home the point that is being made.
Great.
You've amplified the point well, Senator Gill.
But there's neither pictorial nor otherwise on
that one, yes.
Yes, on this one, okay.
Yes.
I'm not saying this is general, I'm just saying it's not there, okay? And it may just be one of those that are not passed through the system. Okay, so I take your point, Madam AG, but just to say that in a world where we are more health conscious and persons are walking in and they're looking at the labels on products, maybe you know, I haven't done the research whether things like cigarette and alcohol are different from a biscuit or something like that. But I think that it is important to put these warnings on it in a pictorial form or otherwise so that everybody can note. Okay, the reports and the part 8 of the bill speaks to reports and information, and there's no stipulation for annual reports. We wanted to know stipulation for annual reports. Yes, that is there. We want to know how that will be monitored and what measures are in place to ensure accountability for this stipulation. In terms of enforcement, inspections conducting a set number of inspections per year can increase accountability of manufacturers. The fixed penalty regime, we believe that it is inadequate and it gives limited availability of alternative sentencing sanctions. It has disproportionately harsh consequences or lead to secondary offending, and it creates disproportionately harsh consequences for the poor, the vulnerable, and the disadvantaged offenders, and also the youth offenders. And we believe the regime, it can lead to secondary offending, particularly acquisitive crime directed towards obtaining the means to meet the fine. It can lead to a deeper contact with the criminal justice system, training for staff of the relevant issuing agency in accommodating the special problems of the marginalized sectors of the community, homeless, the young, those with mental or intellectual disabilities, and the inclusion of judicial and public scrutiny over the relevant issuing agency to avoid the development of discriminatory, unfair, and negligent or corrupt practices. And in summary, the Jamaican Psychological Society supports the Tobacco Control Act of 2020, and we believe that it needs to bolster the role of advocacy concerning the provision of necessary and relevant public education to provide support for businesses that have significant investments in tobacco sales. I'm sure Mr. Booth will agree with me on that. Consider the socio-economic drivers for the sale of tobacco, particularly the small-scale business person working to provide support in school, support children in school, and providing for immediate households, and acknowledge and address the psychosocial motivations of tobacco use and consumption. It is not enough to provide education saying not to use the substance, but also addressing the why and subsequent implications, and integrate a psychosocial framework in the public health strategy. that concludes the presentation. And again, we would just like to thank you for the opportunity to participate in such an important bill.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barnett. You know, your points about the fixed penalty regime really will go much further than consideration for this tobacco control bill. And I use that as a point of departure to say to all presenters how grateful we are for the well thought out presentations coming from different angles and different perspectives. And I see everyone who came after Dr. Arns has been very good with the time, throwing words at you, Dr. Arns, if you're still with us. But we understand just how important these perspectives are as we move into new ground. I will open the floor for questions or comments from members of the committee, but I'd also like to go a little bit more, time permitting, and just to say to the presenters, if you wish to flag anything for the committee's deliberation from a presentation made by one of the other presenters, which goes in another direction from the point that you're asking us to consider, please feel free to do so to further aid us in our deliberations on this very important bill. The floor is open for questions by committee members. I'll open the floor more widely then, if anyone wishes to jump in.
Chair, may I just want to seek a little clarity on something that Dr. Barnett spoke on. Consideration for communicational strategy for smoking and non-smoking as it relates to literacy and disability. Could you expand on that? Because you went through it a little quickly, but I just wanted to understand what the focus was.
Okay, so we believe that we need, in terms of our mantra of inclusiveness, we need to make the point that we have persons of varying abilities in our presence. And so there are those who are disabled, blind, those who are deaf, however, whatever disabilities that is there. And we're saying that whatever the communication is regarding the public awareness, ought to take that into consideration. That is the point that was being made. And that would have been covered from the fact that we are moving away from the wording and we are using now graphic displays to talk about the ills of tobacco smoking.
Agree. No, I understand. I agree totally with you. Thanks, Chair.
Member Longmore.
Thank you, Chair. And let me add my
Mr. Edwards, you can come in afterwards.
Thank you, Madam AG.
Let me add my voice to Dr. Barnett for another excellent presentation. I especially want to thank you for the perspective of including the mental health dangers on the warning labels. I think that we are going pictorial, but you also made sure to indicate the increasing of attitude of persons reading more about their health as we're getting more health conscious and aware, especially during this pandemic. And apart from persons becoming more informed, mental health issues becoming so much more relevant and on the front burner. I think that was definitely a significant input on your part for us to consider that. So thank you again for your presentation and for your group to be here today. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Longmore. We appreciate.
Thank you, Member Longmore. Council, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Madam AG, Chair. And I just want to also endorse your comment about the valuable nature of the contributions today and throughout the whole set of sittings of this committee. the usefulness for the technical team and for those who are involved in the development of the legislation. I would like to ask Dr. Barnett, through you, Madam Chair, to clarify the concern in relation to the fixed penalty regime. And also, I would just like to also see clarification from her and her association in relation to the communication strategy, whether it is that the society, the Jamaican Psychological Society, is expecting change in the text of the law, or they are merely proposing that in the implementation of the policy, that communication of a more inclusive nature should be addressed. So those two issues.
Yes.
Thank you.
I too wondered whether she was asking for a mandate in respect of the manner in which the graphics are to be done to, for example, include the visually impaired, or it is a matter for how that part of it is implemented to take into account the differences in disability and what would be required to effectively reach those persons. But let me ask Dr. Barnett to provide.
Okay, I'm not going to have all the answers right now. I know that we had fleshed it out. We looked at the different stakeholders and just our citizenry on a wide scale, and we note that the bill hadn't taken into consideration those who were disabled, and we thought that should be there. The how of it, we don't know, but we believe that the bill should specifically recognize those persons who are vulnerable. It does recognize the youth, and we're saying that we need to go a little further, or a lot further, and recognize the mentally ill persons in our presence, and also those who are disabled. The how, I am sorry, I'm not able to say that at this point. It was 6 of us who sat there, and as I said, my president is not on. So that's something that we could flesh out, and we could improve on our recommendation, the how. And yes, we're saying that the bill should include the disabled. It should be more inclusive where the mentally ill is concerned.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Barnett, for that clarification. The bill speaks of addressing the health needs of the public. So although it may not elucidate and particularize aspects of the citizenry in detail, it is indeed the policy that it would be inclusive and sensitive to the different categories of persons and abilities, and both intellectually and psychologically, that would be needed to be considered to make the communication strategy effective. Mm-hmm. So although the text of the draft does not use specific language in relation to every sector in relation to capacity and capability, mm-hmm. It is intended to be mm-hmm. inclusive. So that's a policy. Mm-hmm. So in terms of this strategy, I'm sure that the actual rollout will reflect that inclusiveness. As it is now, the bill is stated in a broad framework, speaks to addressing the public health needs mm-hmm. of all. Mm-hmm. But we take the point you make in relation to maybe the signal that should be sent by specifying particular groups. There's something that the developers of the bill and no doubt the committee would take into consideration. But through you again, Madam Chair, the matter of the fixed penalties, we would like a little clarification on the concerns from Dr. Barnett's organization about the fixed penalty and the disproportionate nature and the dissatisfaction that there may be with the provisions as they currently appear. Thank you.
Okay, so I would not say that there is an overall dissatisfaction. What I would say is that based on our research with fixed penalty regime, is that it can, if, for instance, you have, it's $20,000 for this particular thing, we know that there are, when my assistant went out to get these this morning, she didn't go into a big establishment. She went at a little bar or wherever to get it. And these are persons who are trying to, in Jamaican parlance, to make two ends meet. And so when you talk about $20,000, what you are saying, I'm just using hypothetical figures, okay? There are no thing. When you say that to a small man who maybe makes $20,000 in a week, and there's a penalty of $20,000, what it does is that, one, it is going to increase the anxiety, etc., and it will force persons to go under to do other things, nefarious activities, to get that $20,000 to pay that particular fine. Or it may lead to what we deem, we don't have any research, but what we're just talking from that, is that the persons who are imposing the fines, because we know that they're not going to a tax office or going anywhere and making the assumption that somebody's going around with a book and it is paid over to them. Not sure, they didn't see that in the act, but it can lead to corruption and it can lead to other activities being done. And we're saying that that may not be the best way of getting compliance, etc. and things.
Okay, so is it the fixed penalties or penalties in general that the concern? That's what I was seeking clarification on, because the concern seems to be broader than just a fixed penalty regime.
No, I can't take I can't answer your questions any further. Okay. Those were some of the deliberations we had. What you're saying to me is that we need to go back to the drawing board and maybe develop that position a little more, but that's what we had in terms of the fixed penalty regime that the bill speaks of. Okay,
all right. Because I just wanted to clarify, and maybe for the benefit of the wider audience,
yes.
With your permission, Madam Chair, that the fixed penalty regime is meant to be a quote-unquote incentive, in that the level of the fixed penalties is a significant reduction from the maximum potential liability in each case. So, I mean, you may find that a potential liability could be $1 million or over, and the fixed penalty is 100,000. So, a lot of thought was also given on the part of the technical team to including such provisions, because one of the concerns that Dr. Barnett, you mentioned, is the clogging of the judicial system. In other words, relieving the burden on the judicial system. So this was the whole idea of having a fixed penalty regime, which would create an incentive for those who may not want to have the issue of their guilt or innocence either publicized or brought into the courts, but are willing to, for an incentive, significantly reduced penalty without the acknowledgement of liability, pay that penalty and be discharged. So a lot of thought was given. We will consider, of course, the views of your association. Good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Just to say that you had me thinking, Dr. Barnett, on issue. The fixed penalty regime is usually included, and it is a direction in which we're going, because among many other things, it allows for administrative ease in the monitoring and enforcement of penalties. What I heard you saying is that because the prohibition is so intimately linked to health, and the considerations are not just physical health, but there is a psychological, mental dimension, then the legislators should think a little further
Mhm.
on such a regime, while achieving one set of objectives, may worsen and take away from the goals that we're seeking to achieve with this tobacco control law. So that is where the takeaway for me, which would then provide us with some substance when the policy issues are being deliberated on, and perhaps to do a little rethink on it. But may I just say, I thank you for flagging that issue, context of this piece of legislation, proposed legislation.
You're welcome.
If there is no other question, let me use the privilege of this temporary privilege of chair, just to say to the presenters, really to reiterate how grateful the committee is for your thoughtful presentations, very helpful matters you have raised with us as we seek to achieve this important goal, or the goals that this bill is seeking to achieve when it becomes law. And, you know, the issue of the time it takes to pass laws is being raised more frequently in the public domain. And I don't know if there is a sufficient appreciation of the work that is involved in passing laws, and that good laws can only make better laws. And when we move to subjecting the bills to review by joint select committees, where we invite persons who have expertise but are out of the parliament and who will be affected by the law, to further inform the parliament and to comment on what is being proposed. An extremely useful process. It will lengthen the time, and it shouldn't be seen as any delay, but something that is necessary that will make the final product better. Perhaps if we had more parliamentary space, given the number of pieces of legislation now before joint select committees, we could move at a faster pace, but we don't. I say all of that to say that process is important, and the process will take time, but informing that process with the views and perspective of persons like yourselves who have taken up the invitation to come before the committee makes it worthwhile. And we thank you, we thank you. All right, that having been said, more than a mouthful, Ms. Brandon, may we go to the next agenda item, please?
The next item is any other business.
And on that note, is there any other business apart from what was mentioned by the Minister Chair in his comments when he joined the meeting? By way of reiteration, we will close off the deliberations for the rest of the year at this time, and we ask members to use the break to look back, to go through the submissions and the minutes, because the next round will be the deliberation on the matters presented to the committee. So this is a close of presentations from the public.
Madam Chair, it is a customer procedure for a matrix of some sort to be developed. So we can look forward to that matrix. And I'm sure that this one is going to be a very interesting matrix. I see some common threads running through some of the presentations that is going to possibly detain this committee around some very helpful discussions. So I look forward to the matrix.
Yes, Senator, Member Gale. It is customary, and I believe it will be done in the break. But thank you for flagging that issue. for a date to be fixed, having regard to the goals you are setting between now and then. Is your hand up, Senator Allen? Or is it that you're just
it was Chair. In fact, it was in line with the comments just made by Senator Golden Campbell in terms of the matrix and just an indication beforehand so we can prepare. I suspect that will be a very detailed and lengthy process. So the team might be a little taken up by the work, having regard for all of what was presented all these past few weeks. So I too look forward to it.
Very, very well. And I know the minister would want me to.
I think I have some connection issues.
Madam AG?
Yes, Mr. Gale? Mr. Edwards?
It is I, yes. Thanks,
yes,
Madam Chair. Yes. If I may very briefly preempt the issues that may come forward, because one of the matters that has repeatedly come forward is the scope, and I think it's useful to ventilate the scope of public place. And I would just like to reiterate for this. I know the committee members are familiar with what has been said before, that the bill, the text of the bill as it currently is not the intention going forward. It is too broad. And the technical team has appreciated that and has indicated as such, but in light of some of the presentations today, I think it's very important to reiterate that the intention is not to cover every possible public area, public space in relation to restriction on sale or dealings in tobacco, but that the intention is to cover a defined category of spaces, which will build on the current legislation that is in the regulation. So I just want to clarify that it is not the intention going forward, and I believe the committee members do appreciate that that matter has already been taken under serious consideration by the technical team. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Thank you for that clarification.
Madam, just one last intervention on Mr. Edwards' points. Is that the technical team is considering, as they are with the public place definition, other amendments arising from the deliberations that we have had? Would we be able to have sight of those concurrently with our review of the matrix so that we could consider the improved position?
Thanks to you, Madam Chair, to Senator Golden Campbell for that. And this is where the interaction between the different aspects of the technical team is critical, because of course, I represent the Ministry of Health. The drafters, the Office of the Parliamentary Council, is primarily responsible for developing the text. So there will be collaboration between the different members of the technical team and those developing the bill to ensure that whatever material is of most assistance to the committee will be prepared on a timely basis. So thank you to Senator Golden Campbell for that comment.
Thank you, Mr.
Just to say that among the things that I see, Mr. Edwards, is that we may have to look at the existing policy to see if any revision may need to be done in terms of clarifying policy intent in light of the information that has come. And then we will also have to look at the actual text of the provisions, the language of the provisions, to see whether they capture the intention as accurately as possible.
Yes, Madam Chair. And indeed, the drafters and other members of the team will seek to act on decisions of the committee, because there's been a lot of discussion, but the technical team will need to at every point know what is the final decision on the respective point before wording can be proposed. Thank you, Madam.
It may also be useful, Mr. Edwards, as you look on the work to start categorizing the main points.
Oh, yes.
In addition to what the secretary to the committee will do,
Indeed.
you know, to aid the work.
Indeed, Madam Chair.
Having said all of that, I think we have utilized the time well and efficiently. I see it's 4:50. I believe the adjournment would be for a date to be fixed by way of round robin for the next meeting. So if there be no further issue in other business, will someone move for the adjournment of the meeting?
So moved. Alan this time.
And then, Madam Chair,
Very, very well, members Longmore and Allen.
I believe it's Allen and Golden Campbell.
It's Allen and Golden Campbell.
Oh, no, I'm hopeless then in this regard. Very well. May I wish for everyone a wonderful Christmas season. Please abide by the health protocols and remain safe. We sign off.
Have a good Christmas, everyone.
COVID has stressed me. Do take the vaccine.
And through it all, our healthcare workers have been the real MVPs tackling COVID-19. Caring for you is our priority.